Good evening, ladies and mental gents, and welcome to my stream. I think the schedule messed up and scheduled it for the time that I created the stream. It's the only thing I can think of. Because I did say 7 o'clock on the scheduling. But YouTube's interface does all sorts of weird stuff at the best of times. So, who knows? And hello to you all. Hope you're all having a good one. Busy chewing on a lozenge, so I'm not going to start reading until I'm finished that, at the very least. And we'll also give some time for people to stroll in before we start the reading. Although there are less stories this week, they are longer stories, so that is something to look forward to. We've got the ever-present Peachon, our playlist, as a co-host, helping us entertain everyone. Good evening, Jason. How you doing? Very mature music playing. Just for information's sake, the playlist is on random. It's always on random. It's always mocking me. Incessantly, in fact. Almost finished my lozenge. Which chrysalis? The HFI one or the Royal Road one? If you're talking about the Royal Road one, it is a lit RPG about an ant. Well, lit RPG isekai about an ant. Strangely enough, so did I, drones. I just finished my cup of coffee, in fact. If I'm trying to rate with a lozenge in my mouth, I'm going to choke. Which I'm sure would be amusing, but it's not a trick that one can repeat too many times. So the performance of the stream and the clips this week was quite decent. If it keeps up, then I think we can keep doing this. Yep, Chrysalis is basically a magic ant, if you're talking about the real Royal Road one. The HFY one is completely different. Alright, you'll see that the interface looks a bit different this week. I was looking at last week's one and thought, it looks a bit dooge, to say the least. It looks a bit mangy. So, I worked on getting a new one. Well, I made a new one. So hopefully it's a bit clearer, a bit neater. Looks a bit better. We got the chat on the right, we got the text in the middle, nice and big for everyone to read. Simple interface, I think. Makes it look a lot better. No worries, drones. Hopefully the repairs go quickly and you're able to finish them soon. Okay, lozenge finished. Now I just need to drink some water and then we can start. I'm sure people are going to stream in, no pun intended, as we move on. But move on we shall. We've got actually more words this week than last week to read. so it may be a bit longer, may not. Depends on how fast we read. Me. But I don't think I'm going to be doing as many voices this week. The voices do put a strain on me, or my voice, and I don't want to damage it again, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, it's 5 past. We shall start the reading soon as I move my interfaces around so I can kind of see what's happening. Alright. I can vaguely see what's happening. I can see the chats. You can push it gently. You don't need to punch it. Headbutting it would probably be better though. Alright. Lower the music. Each on. Nice and subtle in the background to add a bit of ambience to the reading. And off we go. The exploiters go from star system to star system, silently placing whole races into their factories and fields, encountering no resistance as all races in the galaxy have evolved to cooperate rather than compete and are totally docile. They discover humanity's savagery the hard way. Written by AC 1308. It depends on how many X's, Y's, and Z's there are. High Explorer shares unto himself sneered as he clasped his grasping hands behind his back and allowed his fighting hands to strike the appropriate places of the control panel. Slowly, majestically, the immense bulk of the commanding word lifted from the surface of the planet. On the sensors, he could see the collection of ships rising into the atmosphere. The former population on the planet below, placed into stasis and stacked into the holds. This was his third tour as High Exploiter, and while the satisfaction was still there, it wasn't as deep and full as it had once been. Where was the challenge, the glory to be had from facing a native population and subduing them by force of arms? Letting out a long exhalation, he turned from a view screen and made his way off the bridge. Behind him, he knew full well his officers would be attending diligently to their assigned tasks. They knew all too well the penalty for being caught slacking off. If they were lucky, they would be demoted and counted the stacking xenospecies by hand. All several billion of them. Galactic domination had proved surprisingly easy. His species, technically known as the Adroni, but far more widely called the Exploiters, were known as such, not because the races they exploited, but the single loophole that had proven central to their success. When Adroni spoke, their voices held a subsonic underlay that made other races more likely to accept what they were saying. This was helped by the fact that every single species they had encountered had a basis for mutual cooperation. More useful again, each of these species had independently evolved what he called the command word. Use of a race's command word was guaranteed to elicit full cooperation with any endeavor. Coupled with his own race's subsonic speech underlay, this means that once he found the command word for any given species, he could literally talk them into giving up and walking on board the collection ships. There was 3 ship days to the next planet to be exploited. He spent the time going over what he knew of the local dominant species. Most of the reports indicated that a medium-sized biped called human seemed to be the main suspect, though a few clung to the opinion that the small-furred quadruped called cat was actually running the show. This was based mainly on how humans catered to their demanding nature, but shares unto himself had his doubts. In any case, there was no lexicon available for how cats communicated with humans, while the command words humans used on each other were ripe for the picking. In fact, there was just one, but many, of varying levels of urgency. Over the 3 ship days, shares unto himself memorized them all. When his flagship entered orbit around the blue and white planet, he was ready.
Planetary communication lines had already been mapped out, and translation software stood ready to render his majestic words onto his soon-to-be subject species. As the faces of the many, many world leaders appeared on his screens, he couldn't help but wonder how cooperative a race could be, with so many leaders. Still, it wouldn't make any difference in the end. "Greetings, leaders of Earth," he began smoothly. "I come before you today to request that you join me in a great undertaking." He paused, and then used the first command word. "Please." "What's the undertaking?" asked one of the humans. That wasn't the first time he'd been asked that one, but it was rare. "If you really don't mind," he said firmly. "We are gathering all species together in one huge cooperative endeavor, so, What cooperative endeavor?" asked another human. "Details, please." "Oh, you don't need to know the details," Shares, unto himself, said smoothly, pushing the subsonics a little harder. "So if you could disarm your militaries and enter the collection ships when they land, Why do we need to disarm our militaries?" asked yet another human. Shares, unto himself, lost his temper. "Listen, do as you're damn well told. You want to cooperate, don't you? Have your militaries ready to hand over their weapons when my soldiers land. Oh, there will be trouble." There was a silence for a moment. Then one of the humans leaned forward. "Come and take them." As one, the other humans signified assent and agreement. "Finally," he thought, "my soldiers will be landing at once." He stated out loud, "Be sure to mark out the convenient landing areas." Another of the humans stretched his lips into a smile to show his gratitude. "Oh, we will." Shares, unto himself, was having a nice gravel massage in his quarters when the speaker bled. "Hi, exploiter! Emergency! Emergency! The humans are acting erratically." "Erratically? How?" he asked. Was there a way to solve the last problem of the ship? "They have not handed over their weapons. They fired on our soldiers and massacred them. Now they are taking over the collection ships." That was so ludicrous that Shares, unto himself, scoffed. "That's impossible. The humans must have invited us down to accept their weapons from them. They surrendered to us." "Hi, exploiter, it is what's happening. We've already lost 3 collection ships. Humans have assaulted the guards in the ship and are forcing their way in." "I'll be right there." Shares, unto himself, threw on a tunic and headed for the bridge. Sure enough, when he got there, he was faced with the multiple views of humans forcing his troops back, driving ever closer to the bridge. "You see?" One of the underlings pointed at the screens. "They just went crazy." Shares, unto himself, rolled his outer eyes, while keeping his inner ones fixed on the screen. "Open a channel. I'll sort this out." He couldn't even count on his subordinates to handle this being surrounded Xenosapiens. "Yes, hi, exploiter." A screen cleared, showing a human attackers advancing on the bridge. "No, listen here, chaps," snapped Shares, unto himself. "This is unacceptable. Your leaders have surrendered. You must lay down your weapons, or else." A human turned to the camera, exhibiting an odd one-fingered gesture. "Fucking make us, mate." Shares, unto himself, blinked. "I thought that was what I was doing." As the bridge jaws blew in, he realized all too late that he didn't want a challenge after all. End of story. Dum dum dum. Baelish Chun, here we go. Sip of the old water. And that's story number 1 done. 4 more to go. That's one of the shorter ones of the evening. No, that is the shortest one of the evening.
Just a couple more sips of water, and then we can start with the next one. Alrighty, story number 2. The Price of Peace, written by Echidna Writes. That's what it says. The Price of Peace, written by Echidna Writes. And that's not even a, alien name. It's just, wasn't expecting it. Good evening, homeschool. How you doing? Been a while since seen you about. Hope everything's being well for you. Okay, Peachon, calm down a bit. I want you in the background. I want you subtle and smooth, and yeah, that's not subtle or smooth. That's too subtle, too smooth. Somewhere in between would be nice. There we go. Alrighty. The Price of Peace, written by Echidna Writes. Emperor Galvar walked through the dimly lit hallway towards the secluded room that the two aliens were escorting him to. Looking around, he couldn't hide his distaste, his mandibles flaring and trembling uncontrollably. The metallic clang of his talons made with each step he took only added to the knowledge that he was inside the construct of an alien mind. The trio arrived at their destination in mere moments, and the metallic, colorless doors opened to reveal a table, 2 chairs, one for him and the other for the manufacturer to support the strange anatomy of his peoples. He shook his head, refusing to acknowledge them as such, even if the reality of the sole reason was that he was to achieve the same goal. Tiredly, he made his way to the chair and sat on it. Idly, he watched with his 4 eyes that on the table laid a piece of parchment. His mandibles flexed and felt as if one of his hearts skipped a beat as he remembered what that piece of paper contained. The Emperor didn't wait for long for the doors to open again. Looking at the female, the woman, if he recalled correctly, he couldn't help but examine her for a moment. Unlike the vast majority of other humans he had seen and dealt with, she wasn't wearing any form of power armor, conventional armor, exoskeleton, or even carried a weapon on her. The uniform she wore spoke of not a military might, but one more dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge of laws. Emperor Galvar, the woman spoke with the gentle, barking noises. The translator, all but plucking the sounds from her mouth, made and transforming them into his language. You must be Ambassador Talina, Galvar said, bowing his head to the customary sign of greeting for his people. Talina returned the gesture and approached the table with a slow, cautious pace. I am. I hope your transport was accommodating. Good evening, Tony. Hope you're doing well. Galvar tried but failed to look away as he replied. It was. Your aesthetic decor, however, leaves much to be desired. This is a military vessel, Emperor Galvar. In other circumstances, we would be having this meeting on a diplomatic ship. Alas, this is not the case. Reaching the table, she sat on her chair and leaned forth, resting her elbows against its hard, cold surface. Do you wish for some refreshments? I'd rather do what I've come to do and leave, if you don't mind, Ambassador, Galvar replied, his mandibles flaring, and he stuck his wings threateningly to unfold themselves. Are you quite sure about that, Emperor? She asked in a serious, deep tone. Do you know what will happen once you sign that treaty? He felt his stomach churn and twist inside his thorax, nearly
Chittering, he replied, I wouldn't be here otherwise. I've read what that document contains enough time to have it memorized. Yes, human, I know what will happen. Talina sighed. Let me rephrase my question, then, Emperor. Do you understand what will happen? Galvar closed his eyes, and his body trembled. I've read and seen your history. What you did, what you've done, what your species has achieved. He opened his eyes. I know what you did to the Boucher. The Boucher. Talina whispered the name barely contained contempt. May I tell you a little story, Emperor? Why? It won't change my decision to sign the treaty, he replied. Because I'm afraid you need to know a bit more about humanity than what the info package could ever tell you, she insisted. What more is there to learn? You slaughtered the Boucher, did you not? Galvar said, feeling his exoskeleton shudder for not the first time in his life. Indeed, we did, she admitted. Several seconds passed until the Emperor gave her a soft nod. When we, humanity, that is, reached the stars, finally breaking away from the confines of our solar system, we did so expecting to be received as monsters, primitive, barbarians, or little more than another competitor on the galactic stage. She paused for a moment, musing her words carefully. You see, when we developed the hyperspace, we did so not as a unified species. Science fiction, epic stories, all kinds of possible scenarios had been conjured by our writers, artists, and more about what meeting alien life would be like. Frankly, it was impossible to prepare for every single option presented to us. What do you mean? Galvar asked, having never heard of such information before. The package your admiral delivered never touched on that. Only some of your history, your conflicts, and some of your highest and lowest achievements. We would have followed the usual path of approach, but our current situation could hardly be called usual, don't you think, Emperor? Talina chuckled, and Galvar simply remained silent. Rushed improvisation aside, there were several frightening scenarios placed before us. Could we be the first intelligent species in the cosmos? Could we be the only one? What if the universe ended after cracking FTL travel? Would we meet ravenous, mindless hive minds? Would we stumble across galactic union of sorts? Would there be war with our first contact? She chuckled, just to name a few. Galvar was stunned and baffled. What species could ever dream up so many outcomes upon reaching the stars beyond? Apparently, humans could and did. However, the most popular belief was that if we were to meet intelligent alien life as advanced or more advanced than us, then surely concepts like gods, religion, faith, and make-believe would have been expunged from their society, throwing it aside, discarding it as useless in favor of embracing logic, science, and development. What? Galvar chittered, unable to believe what he just heard. Talina smiled somberly. We really thought that we would be seen as primitives or treated as the laughing stock of the galaxy. Should we encounter the aforementioned galactic union? She used her fingers to make quotation symbols in the air. Galvar couldn't say anything, so he just stared at the human across the table, surprised that the translator system in the room was advanced enough to relay what her gesture meant. Imagine our surprise when, first, we discovered the stellar foreman of civilizations, and second, when we discovered that religion wasn't something to be laughed at, but the norm and the staple of every sapient species. Why would your people ever think that? He asked, confused. It was a good thing that he was already sitting, for the revelation would surely made his legs tremble at the sheer absurdity of the notion. Many reasons, but once we began to speak with each few species that actually bothered to respond to us, we realized a few things. We thought the galactic community would be thriving, not be just a sorry excuse to keep a record of those civilizations that achieved FTL and made contact with the Forum. There was no Senate, no primordials, no precursors, not even a centralized empire, she said, shaking her head in disappointment. Knowing that most civilizations kept themselves, except for those that were relatively close to one another, was a rather hard pill to swallow. Of course, not all civilizations make contact with the Forum, and, equally true, the thought that every single civilization practiced religion in one shape or form was something that we were not expecting. Then 5 years later, as we began to expand and our territory now could be counted to possess 70 systems, the Lbry made contact with us. Galvar felt his entire body stiffen at the tone the ambassador used. For someone who was not part of the military, who could feel her aggression through her voice. No, not aggression. It was something more, something deeper. Anger. Disgust, hate. I read what you did to your people, Ambassador, he said softly. No words I can utter can say or understand your feeling. Talina took a deep, calming breath. We lost 5 billion people, Emperor. 5 billion. 8% of our entire population in under 3 Terran months. And why? The Lbry religion was based on a purity and war. They saw us as impure and thus decided to attack us without warning, without provocation. By the time our fleets could mobilize, they destroyed the stations, mining outposts, every vessel that couldn't flee, and the colonies on the third of our territory. We stopped them before they could breach into more developed systems. Thankfully. And then we began to push back. Galvar couldn't say anything. There was nothing that he could say after hearing that. The teachings of his once unshakable faith told him nothing, but the pain that he could see reflected on the odd expression face of the human told him enough. There was still something he couldn't understand. How could you unify against the Lbry? Your pre-FTL history is litany of carnage, death, suffering, betrayal, and bloodshed. Millions, billions die on your planet due to internal wars and conflicts between different nations. How could you, as a species, manage to survive so long and thrive? Because the only thing that humanity knows how to do better than tear itself apart is band together for a singular purpose. And the Lbry gave us that purpose. She sighed. As we studied them and interrogated the prisoners, we found out why they saw us as impure. The reason? Our religions. She stopped for a moment, standing up and giving the Emperor her back. Every species out there has either one religion or a dominant one with 2 or 3 minor ones that aren't all too different from the main one. Watching her turn around to face him, Galvar could only stare into her 2 green eyes as she continued. We humans have dozens of them. Some major ones, some minor, always shifting, always changing. Some even adopted alien religions, she chuckled. The Lbry hated us because, to them, we were little more than animals that couldn't decide what faith to embrace and follow. Because of that, we were impure, and they attacked, declaring a holy war of extermination against us. Letting us would be allowing us to infect the purity of their faith. Or some nonsense like that. So your solution was to drive them back and exterminate them wholesale. Move a dozen asteroids to destroy their homeworld and bombard their colonies. Galvar asked, why didn't you offer them a chance to live and change their way? Talina blinked. We tried, but they were zealots. I'm sorry, but the translator didn't recognize that word, he said. They were religious fanatics of the worst kind. Each and every one of them, we tried to offer them terms of surrender. Up until the very last moment, we could still change the trajectory of the asteroids. They refused every time. We didn't have to bombard several of their colonies because, after news of what happened to the homeworld reached them, mass suicide acts followed. They blew space stations themselves and scuttled their ships just to remain pure. Galvar closed his eyes, processing the new information that he'd been given. It is funny how religion works or is perceived by other species. The Fulham treats science as a religion. The Vargas religion is based around commerce, wealth, and profit. The Kaljuk's religion is something to what we call atheism. There are no gods, higher powers, or anything like that. We simply are, and this is the only life there is. Ironic, isn't it? Galvar failed to see the irony or the humor in her words when it came to the hedonistic Kaljuk, living their lives isolated from everyone else and indulging in all the excesses of life. Putting those thoughts aside, he opened his eyes. You didn't answer my question, Ambassador. They attacked us, Emperor, without provocation or any cause outside their own religious beliefs, she replied angrily, though not directed at the sapien sitting across the table. An eye for an eye only makes the whole world blind, is a popular saying amongst many of my people's religions. It is also a stupid belief, in my opinion. But you're an ambassador, he protested. How can you, a woman of law, peace, and order, say such things? It is precisely because I am an ambassador that I can say that, Emperor. They killed 5 billion of our people, so in turn we should have killed 5 billion of theirs to call it even. No, we were not going to do something so stupid as to give them a chance to muster their forces and strike us again. We gave them the chance to surrender. They didn't take it, so we killed them all. Humanity has not known the threat of the Boucher ever since. Every child, man, woman, son, daughter, father, mother, and family they butchered without mercy was thoroughly avenged. And your wanton genocide was what sparked the Na'awi to declare war on you. Yes, quite so. But unlike the Boucher, the Na'awi were reasonable and accepted surrender when it was clear that they couldn't win. Now they are our allies. After that, some species came to us asking for aid, not just military, mind you, whilst others tried to prove their mettle against us. Humanity has come a long way in only 13 Terran years, and some time ago we stumbled across you, the Otsuki, and the Gazurka. Good evening, Sci-Fi. Hope you're doing well. Yes, he said weakly, still remembering the day human ships arrived at their home system and took positions on the home world's orbit, guns ever at the ready. I envy your people, Emperor Galvar, Delina said suddenly before retaking her seat. He watched her face internally, trying to find any indication of treachery or deception, but found nothing but sincerity. Why would you envy us, Ambassador? Are you perhaps trying to mock me, my faith, my people? I would never dare to do such a thing, Emperor. I envy your faith, your conviction, she confessed. I ask again, Emperor, do you understand what will happen when you sign that treaty? I want this war to be over, Ambassador. I will carry the burden of the atrocity I'm about to commit proudly, if it means the salvation of my people, the Emperor replied, leaning forth to press one of his 3 fingers against the parchment. Can you promise you'll try your best to end the conflict quickly and avoid further needless bloodshed? I can promise you we will try our best, Emperor. Delina leaned against her chair. But I'm afraid the Zerka don't look like they're kind to accept surrender easily. They remind me of the Boucher in some aspects, in fact, she said grimly. We will bring an end to it, Emperor. That I can promise you with all my heart. She smiled. Your religion, your beliefs represent the best humanity wishes to achieve. Peace, prosperity, love, understanding. He refused to fight back, refused to be broken, and when we offered our help, you denied us because what would happen to your enemies? Thank you for making the sacrifice to save your people, Emperor Galbar. He nodded once, grateful for her words, but knowing how condemned he was for making this decision. After what I've seen them do to my people, he shook his head. Then he looked down at the piece of paper. So be it. With that said, he grabbed the quill set aside for him to use and signed the treaty. Reading the last paragraph, he hoped with all his strength that he was doing the correct thing for his people. The signatories of this treaty validate the entry of the nation known as Enkindlers of Light into the Sacrosanctarum Union with full protectorate. The Sacrosanctarum Union shall aid and defend the Enkindlers of the Light from any threat. May the end of this war come swiftly. The end. Some music.
Alrighty, some more water. Greetings, Harold. Hope you're doing well. Glad you enjoy, or are enjoying. Hopefully my live voice is up to standards. So that was story number 2 of 5. Not short, not long, somewhere in the middle. As long as you don't get too engrossed, Sapphire, and burn your food, that's always bad. Thank you for the kind words, Harold. It's much appreciated. Should have asked this earlier, but is the text clear? Because I've stretched everything, so hopefully it's still clear for you, as it was last week. Nice. Ribeye is always good. And hello, Fallen Angel. Been a while. Hope you're doing well. Cool. Awesome. Great. Fantastic. Alrighty. I suppose. But a while could mean many things. Alrighty, on to story number next. Humans are weird. We haven't done one of them in a while, so I decided to pick one up. And we'll do that. Turn the music down a smidgen.
Alright. Humans are weird. Story number 3. Headlines written by Betty Adams.
Oh, I was hitting the wrong button there. I was hitting the mute button. That doesn't work. I have no idea how much that got cut off, so I'll start again. Yay, live streams.
Story number 3. Humans are weird. Headlines written by Betty Adams. Second sister nearly to her quarters when 25 clicks came darting around the curve of the corridor, followed by his entire flight. They were all chattering to each other on their high-pitched language that pinged off the frills and set the tips of her antennae tingling unpleasantly.
She has. She also has her own YouTube channel, where she also self-narrates her stuff. So that's a thing. But she's also been kind enough to let me narrate it as well and show the text, so that's good.
She suppressed the comparison and stepped to the side of the corridor, hoping that her agitation had nothing to do with her. "Doctor!" 25 clicks called out, barely bringing his voice down into the polite range. Second sister sighed and laid her frill in a neutral flatness, even if she couldn't quite control the tight curl of antennae. The winged was so very impolite, but she had a job to do if they were using her work title instead of her name. She cast a single, longing thought towards her comfortable perch in her chambers, and then turned her attention to the approaching flight. "Base Commander," she greeted the winged. The 30-odd little mammals.
Thank you, Fallen Angel. It's very much appreciated. Doesn't need to be that much. It's a big bright color, and I'm easily distracted, so...
The 30-odd little mammals spent a moment vying for a few surfaces on her body where they could perch, and then rest settled while clinging to the walls. They were still chattering worriedly amongst themselves, but now their eyes were focused on the winged leader. 25 clicks was clearly taking a moment to compose himself by grooming his sensory horns and his wing hooks. Second sister waited for him to finish with what she was and had patience. He finally looked up into her eyes and took a deep breath. He pointed one wings towards the communal space. "Human friend Pierce," she finally managed to say. Second sister fought urge to extend her frill and simply began walking to indicate direction. She should have known that it would take some form of a human madness to set the winged into such a frantic flight. "What, precisely is the matter with human friend Pierce?" she asked. The undulate naming system that the winged had adopted felt sticky to her mandibles, but she knew calling first brother by his proper name would only confuse the flight of winged further. They were currently following her by hopping along the catwalks that lined the higher levels of the walls, avoiding the flight in order to stay calm and focused. And finally, one, presumable the flight medic, managed to speak. "He has taken severe outer membrane damage," the medic said. Second sister tilted her head at him sharply. Why wasn't I called? This is a medical emergency," she asked. "He insisted he was fine," 25 clicks interjected, "and he's not listed as a stupidly stubborn human in the records. We decided to get you to come analyze the damage before we set the alarms ringing." "Reasonable," second sister agreed as she paced along. "Humans are famous for being able to take damage to the outer membranes." "Yes," the flight medic agreed. "They are covered in that forest of microfauna that protects them. And they have that massive layer of fat under it all, too," another pointed out. "Landers," 25 clicks said in a grumbling tone. "Is there something you are hiding from me?" Second sister finally asked bluntly. Tellingly, the entire flight fell silent as they approached the door to the communal work area. They glanced back and forth at each other, using their narrow binocular vision to avoid her broad gaze. Finally, the medic spoke up. "We have speculation that we do not wish to share," he explained, "as it is all baseless." "I would appreciate it," Second Sister said curtly. "Well, the medic squirmed from his perch on his primary joint. "The damage seems to be reserved image of the undulate text. It appears random. But you fear that he may have deliberately applied the damage to himself." Second Sister concluded that it is some form of ritual scarification. An uncomfortable murmur spread through the flight, and 25 Clicks puffed himself out in indignation. "Human friend Pierce is an exemplary ranger," he snapped. "He would not waste time on personal decoration of any sort while on duty." "And this occurred while he was on duty?" Second Sister asked. "Yes," the medic hurriedly interjected. "He went into the tactile isolation console to work on his undulate translation and had the damage when he came out." "I thought he was doing field work today," Second Sister asked. "He had a bad night," 25 Clicks explained. "Something to do with digestion and that new blonde protein he tried yesterday. And he didn't feel that he was competent to maneuver the transport safely. So he decided to work on his training." Second Sister clicked thoughtfully to herself as she opened the door. First Brother was at the far side of the large open space, sipping a cup of common human stimulant. He was slumping against the counter in that nearly undulate way humans had when they were extremely tired. She eyed him critically. "Where exactly is the damage?" she asked the winged. "Right on his face," 25 Clicks said. "The wide fleshy part." Second Sister gave a confused click and paced forward to get a closer look at the human. She heard the clatter of confusion start up amongst the winged as they approached the human, and the sound seemed to catch his notice. He lifted his head and blinked at them slowly. "Second Sis," he greeted her before letting his oral cavity agape with an attempt to draw in more oxygen. "First Brother," she replied with a polite tilt of her head. He returned the gesture, causing the light to fall on the side of his face, and she suddenly saw the damage that the winged had seen. There was indeed many reserved lines of the sprawling undulate language imprinted on his epidermis. "It was way worse," one of the winged above her insisted. "What was worse, little guy?" First Brother asked, squinting at him. "Your face," Second Sister informed him. He stared blankly at her as she reached up to grasp his chin with one hand, turning his face to examine the damage. His eyes tracked hers in that rolling, disconcerting way humans did for a few seconds until he burst out laughing. "Something's wrong with my face?" he asked. "You have taken damage," she replied. "It looks like pressure damage." The human gave one of those deep, lunging grunts that only a giant mammalian lungs could produce, and easily pulled his chin out of her grasp. He turned to the reflective surface of the nutrient-warming device and tilted his head to get a look at the fading marks. "Ah," he said, "I fell asleep while practicing undulate touch writing. The reverse grooves must have left these marks." "Do they pose any danger to you?" Second Sister asked. "Nah." The human dismissed the idea with a wave of the hand. "It's like cautery line or whatnot." "That give no relevant information," Second Sister pointed out. First Brother stared at her with a blank, unfocused eyes for several long moments, giving Second Sister plentiful time to assess the situation. The winged was still disturbed, and the human was clearly not operating at full mental capacity. "First Brother," she said firmly, "it is my opinion as the base medic that you should spend the rest of the day resting in your quarters." But, whatever First Brother was about to say in protest was lost in a massive yawn that seemed to stretch out his spine and curl his entire body in odd directions. "Maybe you've got a point," he said when the yawn was done. "I'll get back to bed." And the sprite will escort you, second sister said quickly. Sure, sure, first brother said, holding out his hands invitingly as he shuffled towards the door. The winged followed their human friend Pierce eagerly, abandoning second sister to the blissful silence of the now empty workspace. If she hurried, she might be able to make it back to her perch before there was another medical oddity. End of story.
Good evening, Hampers. How you doing? The other thing about the donation is I can't see the screen with the chat directly when I'm reading, so I see that at the corner of my eye. So when you sent the super chat, it just flashed a bright color in the corner of my eye, which, like most people, you turn to look at. But, whatever. I'm easily distracted at the best of times. The joys. Okay. No worries. Okay. I think bright colors and shiny rocks are everyone's downfall. Yeah, the gifting stuff on Steam has always been weird, especially when it's across different countries. Not sure what you mean, Tony. Playlist John is in a playful mood, apparently. Okay. I don't mind playing any game. And I have heard of Hollow Knight. What's it called? A precision platformer. Okay, so that was story number 3. We've got 2 more to go, but they are 2 quite long ones. So we might only actually get to 1 of them. Good evening, Mary. How are you doing? Hope you're doing well. I approve in your taste of listening to my stream. It is very, very good taste. Superb, even. Doing wrong stuff. No worries. I mean, I can do a, well, what I did in, what game was it? Oh, when I first started Valheim, I was doing the voice acting, because there was none. I say voice acting, I'm just a guy who talks, but yeah. Alright, story number next. This is a spelling mistake, so it is The Spearman, written by Sci-Fi. Just drop the music down a bit, just so it's a whisper. Just a hint of music. Hopefully it doesn't play mocking music at me again. I've heard he's 50 feet tall and breathes fire, Kekt, the old shriveled goblin, said as he perched on the edge of the counter in Mock's shop. The air hung thick with the dust, as was so common at the end of summer. The crops would not be ready for the harvest for at least another moon, maybe two. There was nothing to do but wait for the heat and thick, cloying air. The boredom gave way to gossip wings, and the old goblins of the Tekyle village sat and talked. "Bah!" Beric said. "That's not true. He only human. He can't be more than 6 or 7 feet at the most. Nay, I tell you, 'tis not his size nor any flaming breath. It's his gaze. His baleful gaze burns the souls out of any living things he casts it upon. That be a true danger." "His gaze?" Ashoy asked. "You'd think he kills anything he looks at. How does he relax at home, knowing to even glance at his children would end their lives? Nay, I say, his arm be where his strength lie, a mighty blow that can fell 1,000 men at once. It seems to me," old Cheplix, the wise man of the village, said, "that stories oft become better in the telling. Mayhaps we should wait for the spearman to arrive before repeating half-heard tales from travelers looking for free bed or young adventurers extorting their abilities. None of us have seen this man." "It wouldn't be long now," Chepex, the youngest, said as he entered from the dusty thoroughfare. "Good afternoon, grandfather," he said, bowing to his namesake. "There is a horse and a rider approaching. Appears to be human." "How tall is he?" Kekt asked. "Normal height, I suppose," Chepex, the youngest, said. "For a human, that is." "Did he catch you in his baleful gaze?" Varrock answered. "I don't... maybe? He's still some distance off from the village." "Did his arms look like tree trunks?" Ashoy asked. "They seem to be about the right proportions," Chepex, the youngest, said. "I haven't seen many humans before, though." "Standing here pestering my grandson will bring you no answers," old Chepex said. "Why don't we move to the porch and see for ourselves?" The old goblin stood up with much groaning and grunting and grumbling. There were complaints of knees, hips, hearts, lungs, and even one about an overworked spleen. Ashoy has never known what a spleen was or what it did, but it was one piece of knowledge beyond the rudimentary understanding of his fellows, so he mentioned his spleen as often as possible. The group finally managed to bring themselves to the porch. Across the dust-choked plain, a tall figure of a man atop a horse meandered. Time slowed to a crawl in the late afternoon heat. Sounds seemed trapped in the amber. Feet were made of lead and hands of stone. Even thoughts seemed to become mired in the soul's stabbing sultriness. After an entirety of the afternoon, the man on the horse came to town. The goblins looked up at the human towering over them with his worn mount. The man paid them no mind. Hooves clomped stolidly through the town, right up to the village well. The man barely touched the reins to bring the horse to a stop. Swinging one long leg over the horse, the man alit with the dried earth, kicking up a small puff of dust. He squatted down to stretch the ligaments and the muscles tight from a day's saddle. He stood and twisted, first to the left,
and then to the right. He pulled his hat off for a moment to swipe the worst of the sweat away. The man was stolen over the well and lowered the communal bucket into the depths. After hearing a faint splash, he hauled the bucket up and turned back to his horse. The steed shoved its nose into the bucket and drained it in one long draught. The man refilled the bucket and then drained half of it down his throat and dumped the remainder on his head. Excuse me, sir, Chapex the younger said from several feet behind the man. The man said without turning his face to the young goblin. Receiving no further response, Chapex the younger was at a loss. He turned to face the cluster of elder goblins watching from a distance. All but his grandfather urged him to continue. Old Chapex stood still and waited to see what his grandson would decide. The young goblin turned his back to the human. Are you the one they call the spearman? Chapex the younger asked. The human was pulling the saddlebags off his horse when he answered, Yeah, be called that, he said. Pausing for a moment, he continued, That and many other things. Chapex the younger turned back to the elders and nodded. All but the grandfather turned away and started pacing. To the human, Chapex the younger said, We've heard, stories about you and, about what you do. And what do I do? The spearman asked. You destroy cities, Chapex the younger said. They say that you have brought down entire civilizations. They say that you've destroyed empires. They say you bring the end of times. The spearman paused, resting his head on the worn leather of his saddle. The smell of horse sweat and man sweat choked him. No, he said, I don't destroy cities and all that other stuff. I'm a messenger. Those too prideful to hear my message often end up destroyed. I haven't killed a man, or a goblin, or a dwarf, or a saurian, or any intelligent thing in just about half of forever. Tell your village elders I need to talk to them. Tonight, here in front of the well. The sun had dipped below the horizon hours before. The last of the day's heat evaporated from the dirt and the stones and the wood of the village. A few torches burned in front of a handful of houses and shops. Even the ringing of the blacksmith's anvil had fallen silent. The village elders gathered as the spearmen had asked. Most of the village had turned out to see what the stranger would say, or do. The spearman walked out of the darkness and into the small circle of torchlight. He had cleaned himself from the road rust and now wore a simple but clean jerkin and thin leather vest over the serviceable pants. He carried an aged and worn spear in his left hand, the head of which was nicked and all but unusable. Hear me! The spearman bellowed. There was an rush of air as dozens of goblins gasped. I serve the light wizard Emperor Arian. I come to you as his emissary. My master has cast his watchful eye over your village and wishes it to become a part of his empire. Why should we? An arrogant and anonymous voice shouted out from somewhere in the goblin throng. Fair question, the spearman said. A fair question indeed. You serve the goblin king Pakal, do you not? There was a general grumbling of assent to this question. Yes, I know he lays claim to this region, the spearman said, but he cares not for any of you. This village is poor. You are many days' ride from his lair. You do not lie amongst any trade routes. The village has no military value. He claims you as greedy children claims all the sweets. He thinks he desires you, but he truly only desires the thought of having you. And your master is different, another voice from the throng, as unknown and unknowable as the first. Yes, the spearman said. The crowd began to murmur and giggle. Hold your laughter. My master will deal with you straight. He exalts me to honesty in my tasks. I tell you now, with no trace of falsehood, this village is important to my master. Old Chapex, who was at the front of the crowd and had held his tongue throughout, spoke. Aye, your master may care for the village, but what of the people? My master cares nor for you, the spearman said. There was a rush of concerned whispers. But stay your hand but for a moment. I tell you, this is a wonderful blessing. My master will protect your village with all of his considerable might, and you'll be free to live as you will. You may set whatever laws in your town as you wish, save for those which endanger the empire. You may worship as however you gods dictate. You may hold whatever festivals and feasts to which you are accustomed. And the price for such blessing? Old Chapex asked. Not as much as you fear, the spearman said. You must, of course, swear allegiance to my master and forsake the Goblin King. You must send a representative to the throne, as my master desires to know more of your ways. You must agree to export 1/10 part of your carveweed, and with 1/5 part of your glow shrooms to the throne. My master may establish a garrisoned outpost near here, and you may be asked to deliver water to them. Not 1/10 part of our caveweed? Old Chapex asked. What use could a grand wizard emperor need with such meager plant? And glow shrooms are not fit fodder for even such as your mount. Why would your master ask for such useless goods? Who knows the ways of a wizard? The spearman asked. I know only that he is ancient and he is wise. I've seen his powers, unimaginable powers, firsthand. I stand before you as a testament to that power. And how is that? Old Chapex asked. Have you much truck with men, old goblin? I've met more than a few. And how long do men live? They live for as long as their lives allow, Old Chapex said. Some are stolen from the land of the living, still in the crib, and some are filled with days beyond measure. I ask not as a trick, nor as a puzzle, the spearman said. It's not philosophy. What's the oldest man that you've met, and the oldest that you've heard of? Well, Old Chapex said, I have met one man who claimed to be over 50 summers. I do not believe I've even heard of tales of one beyond 100 summers. What of my age? How old am I? You seem to be a fit, so maybe 30 summers? Old Chapex said, wary of some trap. I tell you now that I have seen more than 680 summers, the spearman shouted. My master has granted me an unnatural life as a reward for my good and faithful service. I have traveled the face of the world in many years. I have brought my master's offer to untold cities and villages. Those that accept are welcomed into the empire with open arms. And those that don't accept, Old Chapex asked, are never heard from again, the spearman said. I swear to you my master is just and fair. He will treat you well as loyal subjects. Know that with or without your village, my master will press his attack on the Goblin King, leaving his realm either subjugated or destroyed. You here today have a choice that those later in the war will not. I pray you do not squander it. The goblins looked at each other and whispered. You have given us much to ponder, spearman, Old Chapex said. Will you give us time to do so? Ooh, cell phone message. Right in the middle of a fantasy story. Perfect. I can give you until sunset tomorrow, the spearman said. For at fall of dark I must report to my master. Very well, Old Chapex said. You will have your answer by sunset. The spearman nodded and turned back to the darkness where he secured his horse. When he was sure he was beyond the firelight, he shook his head and leaned on his spear. Debate rarely served him, but it was a matter of only one day. The following evening, as the sun just reached the horizon, Chapex the Younger walked away from the village towards the small crops of trees where the spearman had made camp. The last few wisps of smoke curled up from the fire wherein the spearman had cooked his meal. His horse gazed and grazed a handful of yellowing grass at the edge of the camp. "Spearman!" Chapex the Younger shouted as he approached the camp. "Spearman!" "You needn't yell so, young goblin," the spearman said. Yeah, that would have been good timing, but maybe one day. "I did not want you to mistake me for an attacker," Chapex the Younger said. The spearman looked down at the scrawny youth wearing threadbare clothes and carrying nothing. "That was kind of you," he said. "I assume you bring to the decision of the village." "I do, spearman," Chapex said. "The village will not pledge to your master. They feel that a human wizard will not treat them well. The Goblin King is, well, a goblin." The spearman sighed and stared down at the spot-stained dirt between his feet. "And what do you think, young goblin?" I think the elders are wise, and so they must be right," Chapex the Younger said. The spearman looked up into the open face of the goblin. "Wisdom doesn't mean infallible," he said, "and it doesn't prevent your own biases and fears from interfering." "But they are my elders," Chapex said, "and I will follow them." They follow the Goblin King?" "Yes." "Very well," the spearman said. "Would you like a bite of the tiger beast before you go?" "I should be getting back," Chapex said, "and I should contact my master." "What will he do?" "Exactly what I told you," the spearman said. An hour later, after the sun's last rays died in the west, the spearman sat in front of the small, pale blue jewel propped up on a rock. The inside of the jewel began to swirl with clouds. The shapes shifted and turned until they formed a face deep in the jewel. "My master," the spearman said. "Faithful servant," the old wizard said. "How goes the mission for the cave weed?" "The villagers have said no," the spearman said. "They are still loyal to the Goblin King." "Regrettable. Could you spare this town? They are small and weak. They are no danger to you and your mighty empire. A force of 12 men could carry off as much cave weave as you require." "Yes, we may raid them, but we cannot control them. Our forces push further into the Goblin Kingdom. We'd forever be wary of this village at our back. They will give aid and comfort to those who would do us harm. They may poison our waters and disrupt our supply lines. We cannot risk such a thing. To save the lives of my soldiers, I shall destroy the village. Then I shall send a mining expedition, and we shall retrieve the cave weave ourselves." The spearman hesitated before saying, "As you command, master." He stared at the jewel for a moment more. "Will it be quick?" "This village has done nothing to displease me. I'll make their destruction swift and as painless as I can." The spearman saw movement from the corner of his eye and turned to see the black clouds swirling over the village. A light bolt ran across the sky. The wind howled. Dust devils spiraled away from the village. In a moment, a portal opened in the middle of the black clouds over the village. A blinding orange and red fountain of energy poured through the clouds and engulfed the village in a brief, terrible instant. The spearman jerked his head away and threw his hands over his eyes as soon as the portal began pouring forth. When the thunderous noise finally stopped, he pulled his hands down and opened his eyes. Where the village once was now stood only a deep, glassy crater. The sheer bowl in the landscape would have taken an hour to walk around on foot. Any animal falling into the crater would likely starve to death, for the sides were too slick to climb. The spearman stared he gaped, then nodded. So, it is done, he said. Quick and painless, said the wizard. You have your next mission. With that, the jewel fell silent and the cloud depths dissolved. The spearman pocketed the jewel and began readying his horse. Maybe the next village will listen, the spearman said. His horse whinnied and he shook his head. Sometimes they do, he said, looking back at the glassy crater as he mounted up. He said, but only sometimes. End of story.
Just drinking some water. Might as well push the peach on up so that she can play a nice song. There we go. That one was quite dark. Although it was a bit open-ended for an ending. True. Thank you, drones. I did, and thank you very much, Wall. It is very much appreciated. I'll load it up onto my Steam after the stream, and then probably tomorrow or the next day I'll give it a go, do some voice acting for it. Ah, drones. You accused everybody else and it was yourself. I'm busy trying to decide whether my voice is up to another story or not. For some reason today it's been quite strained. Well, not strained, but tight, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So until I make that decision, I'll sit here and chat with you guys, which is part of why I do live streams. Yeah, just remind me which story that is, Fallen. I can't see specifically who's watching drones. I can just see how many. I don't know whether they would allow me. I know that they do have an audio version, of the first book, I think. It was paid for by the author, so I'm not sure whether they would allow it or not. Actually, I think I did ask and I didn't get a response. This would have been a while back, so I can't really remember. I'd have to go back through my emails. I can't say that you can or can't, drones. Well, I'll check again, like I said, Borden. I'll look through my emails. I know I asked a lot of authors back in the beginning. I think I may have not asked Wandering In because there was already an audiobook. But I'll check. I will admit, I've had 3 series basically be cancelled over the last month, so I'm a bit hesitant to start more series from Royal Road. Well, according to that list, I've got 3 participants. It's only telling me who's chatting, not who's watching. Yeah, Harold, it should be fine. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, Fallen. Like I said, I'll double check. One of the other ones I was thinking of doing at some point was the Gods of Bastards as well. There's just so much content that even I can't keep up with it. No, it's still been published on Royal Road. It was last updated on Wednesday. Wednesday? 24th of February 2021. It's last Wednesday. It isn't so much that there isn't stuff to read, it's finding the good stuff. Stuff that hasn't gone on hiatus or been cancelled. It's also a problem, a big problem. And I understand what happened. I mean, life happens. You can never stop life happening. I think I was on their Discord for a time. I'm not entirely certain. But right now, I want to get back to the same level of production as I was at the end of last year, before the voice problems. And once that's stabilized again, with the streams, then start thinking of doing more stuff again. With the cancellation of all those series, it's also made me think of doing more original content, but I don't know what form that'll take. Yikes, that's not good. There is tons of content. Tons and tons. It just takes a lot of wading to get through to find it. Which admittedly I do have less time to do now than when I started. Okay. Always rough when that happens, to try and get everything finalized and finished and all obligations met. Oh, I just remembered something. Cool, no worries, Warren. So I found a thing. Oh, let me not do it on that one. Let me do it on this one. I found a thing which I thought would be funny. And I saved it. But I can't remember where I saved it. Okay, I didn't save it there. So it was a story generating website, but it had like half a dozen, a dozen things that you could enter. And then it would generate a story for you, anywhere up to like 1,000 words. Which I thought was funny. When I find it again, we might do a stream with that where, as a chat and community, we fill in the blanks and come up with a story. Similar to that. I think it was this one. Warning, it's gonna be bright. Not my fault. As you can see, I run everything in dark mode, so it's the website, not me. I think it was this one. It could be a different one. So you could choose what you want: a short story, movie script, fairy tale, story ideas. So let's click on fairy tale, and then you got a lot of options, and then it'll generate a fairy tale for you, or a short story, or whatever. Or you could fill them with random stuff, and it'll create a story for you. So I thought that was funny. Well, you don't really need to do it and ask me anything. You can just ask me. I normally answer stuff in streams when people ask questions, but I always reserve the right to not answer questions that I don't feel appropriate. But if you have a question, ask. Drop a comment below if you want to ask a question. I'll try answer it if I can. Right, that's light. I normally drink Red Bull as my go-to thing, but if I do drink a Monster, I drink the Assault flavor. But I find that Monster normally actually gives me quite bad heartburn, whereas Red Bull doesn't give me as bad heartburn. In fact, I had a Red Bull earlier today. I don't drink as much as I used to. I used to drink way too much. Kraft macaroni. I'm guessing that's a brand of macaroni and cheese. I make my own macaroni and cheese. Normally macaroni, cheese, bacon with sometimes scrambled eggs. All smushed together. Yeah, that's why I don't drink as much as I used to, drones. Mostly these days I drink water and coffee. That's about it. It's not good, Fallen. Okay, so this was recommended by Fallen in the super secret Discord server that is linked in the description. We're gonna have an argument about macaroni and cheese. Suppose it's the internet, you can argue about anything. Start adventure. Pick a setting. Ooh. Well, seeing as we've done a bunch of HFY stuff, we'll explore worlds. I have no idea what I'm doing. Free worlds. Be free. Free's good. Free is my favorite genre, as well as my favorite type of game. I think we'll go with Kadar. That looks fantasy. These are all fantasy. I don't want fantasy. I wanted sci-fi. I wanted HFY. Damn you. Apocalyptic, I suppose. Ooh. Select a character. Soldier, survivor, or courier. I would disagree, drones. I'd say that you need at least a mature cheddar. Or if you want speeding particularly inspired, maybe a mozzarella. We'll go with courier. Name your character. Aggro. Sir Aggro of the Squirrels. Junior. The third. In Roman numerals. It is very much appreciated, drones. I think content creation is going in new ways, and more people will be joining services like Patreon. I mean, Patreon isn't the only one. I can understand having a quick and easy mac and cheese. Oh, good. An AI going crazy and killing me. That sounds pleasant. Sounds interesting, even. Okay, so this is a choose your own adventure sort of thing. Awesome. I don't think I've had craft. I'm not entirely sure. As a brand, it's not sticking out in my head. I've heard of it, but that's from American shows and the internet and stuff. Alright, this looks entertaining. I'm sure I could build an entire stream around this. In fact, I probably will. Yeah, save. Done. But probably not today. My voice is still strained today. Some days it's like that. Some days I can do more content than others. Depends on how well I sleep, what I've eaten, a million other factors. And today doesn't seem to be one of the good days. Well, good. Done an hour and a half of reading, which isn't bad. Plus the 2-hour stream this morning and some recording during the day. Alright. I think we'll definitely do a stream around this. Unfortunately, the next story I have prepared is quite a long one. It's a 25-minute one, and I'm pretty sure my voice isn't going to... Well, I can do it, but I'm probably going to damage my voice. I shall do so. I think that is going to be it. I do apologize for not being able to do the 5th story, but I am trying to be more careful and considerate of my voice since December. Hopefully next week it'll be a bit better and we can push for the full 2 hours. Drones, I live in South Africa, in Johannesburg. If you get a chance and are so inclined, you should probably join the Discord. People ask me stuff there all the time. No. That's the problem with doing a stream at this time for me, is it's at the end of the day. So I've had a whole day of using my voice and all of that. So it's like peak strain time for me. Yes, Table Mountain. So, someone was giving a lecture on languages the other day, thinking that they would get banned because they were giving a lecture on languages. So, that was a thing. In the Discord. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, definitely join. It is linked in the description. Also, before I get moaned at, there is a second channel for short content, which is different from my normal content, which is I'd say speed reading, basically. It's like if I drank 5 Red Bulls and did a narration. So if that sounds interesting to you, go check out the second channel, which I think is also linked in the description. I think. I could be wrong about that. For some reason, YouTube resets to the description randomly for streams. If it isn't now, I will add it at the end of the stream. There is also merchandise, new merchandise, with hopefully more merchandise coming. And there's a link for the second channel. But there is merch link down below. If you're interested, have a buy of that. You will be noticing that my splash page has changed. It'll be phased in over the next couple weeks to include links and reminders about the merch and the second channel and the Discord and the stuff. Drones, yeah, there was a lot of footage of Table Mountain, and I live absolutely no, I don't live anywhere near Cape Town. My wife doesn't narrate, really. She has one line in one of my stories in one of my TFOSs. So if you can find that, good for you. We have a boring screen of text. We should probably do something to have more interesting background. The problem is, anything copyrighted will get my video taken down. And I don't really have just random footage around. I think most wives berate. My wife doesn't have a channel. Drones? I don't think. Not that I know of. Peach-on. No need to scream at everybody. This delay is killer on having a conversation. It's very disjointed. If you're looking for a sample of my wife's narration skill, I can give you a hint. It's within the first 500 TFOS. Actually, it's number 500. I wouldn't want you to have to go through almost 700 TFOS to find it. The computer voice in that story was my wife. And that's pretty much the only one. Yeah, no, that is the only one that she's done. No worries, drones, no worries. It's part of the job description, Oliver. Tony, whichever you prefer. Part of the job description. So, random question, and those that do follow my second channel will know that I've been doing some SCP stuff, so that's Secure, Contain, Protect. which is quite different from the HFY content. So would you guys be interested in if I did some on the stream? Would you want to see videos of that? Of the longer SCP stuff? Cheers, drones. Have a good one. Listen to them on repeat on 3x speed with adverts. I'm joking, Google. I'm joking. Please don't ban me. Anyways, I think that's going to be me for the evening. Thank you all for joining. And with the question of the SCP stuff or other content, that's true. But I mean, there is tons of content out there. And some of them aren't horror-ish. But there is hundreds of them, so it's a matter of just going through them and finding nice ones. It's SCP for Secure, Contain, Protect. But if you guys do have content that you'd like to hear, I'm always open to suggestions. I don't guarantee that I'll do anything, but I'll at least have a look when I get time and if I remember. Thank you all again for popping past. That's me for the evening. I hope you all have a good one. If you want to ask any questions, pop into the Discord, ask, or ask in the comments. Any suggestions for the same? Yeah, can't think of anything else. Also, I do stream every day, so during the morning, so 12 hours from now, or when I started this. So if you're interested in games and me messing them up, join us for that. Cheers, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye.